Are you ready for a show that talks sports from the fans' point of view?
We've seen Michael Jordan score 37 points a game in his era. How many could he score in today's NBA?
There's not a player out there who I'd rather have than LeBron James.
Are you ready for a show that isn't afraid to challenge anyone when it comes to sports? If Adam Silver really wanted to fix tanking in the NBA, he would stop rewarding teams by giving them the best chance to win the draft lottery.
I mean, how many times will Roger Goodell drop the ball on handling domestic violence in the NFL?
Look, athletes have every right to talk politics, but if the fans stop tuning in, that's their right.
Then you're ready for Talk Back, a podcast where two fans debate the media narrative and discuss the world of sports as we see it.
Welcome to the show.
It's time for another edition of Talk Back. I am your MC, Eric Nesbit, and with me as always is your host and director of content, Justin Gay. We have an awesome show lined up for episode 247. It's been a little while since we've talked to you because one of the series was done in the Western Conference, but one of the series needed a little bit more time, and we said it might go 6 or 7 games out in the East. It was indeed 6. But the result might not have been what we thought it was going to be. So in segment 1, we'll wrap up those conference finals. Then in segment 2, it's talk-worthy. Yes, the Lakers are making a fine mess out in the West. We'll have to hit on that a little bit. But before that, let's talk about those finals. Now that we know the two teams that are going to be battling for the NBA championship in 2019, we'll have to do a little bit of a preview on that, and we'll wrap up the show with overtime, a little bit of NASCAR, a little bit of PGA Tour, some hot topics for you. That's episode 247 coming up right after this.
So Thursday night, the NBA Finals will tip off, but let's talk about how we got there first. And let's start in the East there, because this was the biggest shocker to me. We both thought the Bucks would win this series, and when they were up 2-0, like you said there in the teaser, we really didn't know what to do with the show because we thought Milwaukee would take care of business in this series. Eric, they dropped 4 straight games after the Bucks went up 2-0. The Raptors will make their first trip to the NBA Finals. So Bucks up 2-0. Eric, did you think at any point that we would be talking about the Raptors pulling off 4 straight to get to the finals?
No, I really didn't. In fact, I think it's a great lead-in because, yeah, we both said that this series was probably going to be more highly contested than I don't think either one of us was really sold on the Trailblazers, right? We both said, I think, 5 games out in the Western Conference Finals. It ended up being 4. We'll get to that in a minute. But we both said 6, and I think we both said Bucks in 6. So we gave the Raptors a little bit of credit. I think Kawhi Leonard and obviously Lowry being there, we gave them a little bit of credit for being a tough team out in the East. Well, it looked like the Bucks were going to control this series after 2 games. One was a little bit more tightly contested, and one was, by all accounts, pretty much a blowout. But then when things shifted and we went to game 3, you saw a little bit more fight from the Raptors. You actually saw some very good coaching adjustments, I thought, because their defensive presence, their scheming to kind of really shut down Giannis for the remainder of the series, either on the stat sheet or even in his head. And I want to ask you about that in a minute. It just seemed to me that the tide really started to change after the Raptors pulled up even 2-2. And I still thought, okay, now we have a series. But another game, and the Raptors just wouldn't go away. And not only that, they came back from some deficits to pull this off. So it did go 6 games, but it didn't go to the Bucks. It goes to the Raptors. Justin, I think this opens up a can of worms out in the East. You saw how dejected Giannis was from this defeat. I think the Bucks really assumed that they would be the team going on to meet the Western Conference champions. Maybe overlooked the Raptors a little bit, but from what you saw on the basketball court, what were your takes away from this series? Did the Bucks overlook them after getting up 2-0, or did the Raptors just change their scheme enough to make this happen for them?
I definitely think it's the latter. What Toronto did was they started playing more guards, and they just went small, and Milwaukee's guards didn't show up. Bledsoe was basically a non-factor in this series.
Yeah.
Brogdon, we talked about, is more of a floor guy, plays good defense, not really an outside threat. Middleton was very up and down. He had one really good game in that last 4-game stretch that Toronto won. So he really didn't do much for the Bucks. And then I just felt like, Eric, they didn't adjust very well. And in talking about the Bucks and Mike Budenholzer, that they didn't adjust to what Toronto was doing. So Toronto started throwing a lot of Kawhi at Giannis, but they also started throwing a lot of double teams. And for much of that game, Giannis was getting the ball on the wing where they were setting the trap, and he's right there near the out of bounds line. So in effect, they had basically a 3-player trap going on. It just clogged down the offense. A couple weeks ago, I made reference to the fact that Giannis reminds me of some kind of combination of Shaq and Russell Westbrook. And the reason I picked those two guys was neither one of them were a great outside shooter. That's what you saw from Giannis. They were more than willing to let him shoot 5, 6, 7 threes a game and take those long jumpers. They did not want him to get into the paint and dominate. And really nobody else on the Bucks showed up for him. And then on the flip side, when you saw what Toronto did when Van Fleet went crazy and went 14 of 17 from 3, Milwaukee had nobody that was able to give them any type of production that way. So I didn't really understand what the Bucks were doing. They completely stopped playing Mirotic in this series. They weren't taking advantage of the fact that they had guys like Brook Lopez, and they weren't doing anything to get the switches on the guard and to work him into the post. Same with Giannis. Eric, they really didn't utilize him in the post, which I think I text you of, why aren't they getting him, just stop getting him the ball at the top of the key or on the wing and try to get him in the post. Let the double come where he can look over and have better passing lanes. He's trying to pass over 2 guys, throwing it clear across court. And that's why you saw a lot of turnovers from him as well. So I thought Toronto adjusted very well. They were down 2-0, and they're like, all right, well, we'll just do what the only thing we really can do and throw more guards on the floor and go small. And Milwaukee sort of fell for it. They fell right into that trap. Their guards got completely outplayed in this series, which really, I think, leads to some of the frustration that Giannis had after this series was over when you saw him walk out of the press conference, because he didn't get a lot of help and he himself didn't adjust very well. The coaching staff didn't adjust very well. Eric, there was no excuse to lose 4 straight games to this Toronto team. They have one guy right now that's playing dominant basketball for them. Everybody else has kind of been extremely up and down outside Van Fleet, and they really let 2 guys beat them.
No, all of those are excellent points. The one thing that I want to kind of dig into a little bit, and I guess we can't right now because the one thing I didn't do was dig into summary stats for the Eastern Conference Finals. I go sometimes by the eye test, though. I mean, you and I were both fans of basketball, of sports in general. We're not getting paid to sit for 8 hours and break down stats and do summaries and look at all of the comparisons and game by games and everything else. So I'm going by the eye test. Justin, for me, the eye test told me that Giannis was not an MVP caliber player, at least in that series. Now, again, maybe if I look at the stats, it'll show me differently, but I didn't feel his presence on the floor the same way that I felt for Kawhi Leonard on the other side. It seemed to me that Giannis also was off the floor a little bit more than I had expected. Again, maybe if I look at the minutes, I'm going to be wrong on that, but sometimes perception is reality. I felt like Giannis was sitting or on the bench in key and critical moments when you needed to flip the script on the scoreboard. And I just look at guys in the past who have played a lot of minutes, and I just didn't feel like Giannis was a huge presence in this series. Did that at all play into his frustration? I know you said he kind of walked out of that press conference, and I saw that, and I didn't think the question was all that unreasonable, to be honest with you, the one he walked out on. I know players can get frustrated by bad and dumb questions from reporters. I didn't think the question was that unreasonable, but I definitely sensed what you were saying, that just as a unit, there wasn't a lot of good things happening there, from the coaching, the guards, right down through Giannis's play. So I'm just going to bring it back to Giannis. Justin, did you see an MVP caliber player in Giannis in this series?
No, I really didn't. To me, Giannis looked like they were able to expose some of the holes in his game right now. His ability to get downhill. And again, when you have teams that are coming in the regular season and they're on a 3, 4, 5 game road trip and they're going through a shoot around and they don't have a ton of time to prepare, Giannis will eat them alive. When you have a team that is locked in and you have all your scouts and your entire coaching staff and your entire film department devoted to trying to find every single weakness they can and ways to stop a guy, this is where you see guys' flaws get exposed. in these series. And that's what happened. The longer this series went on, the worse Giannis seemed to play. And the free throw line, Eric, that's really where I was shocked at what he did, because Giannis was a good free throw shooter in the regular season and early in the playoffs. And then you look through his free throw percentage for the last, from games 3, 4, 5, and 6, he went 28.6%, 60%, 44.4%, and 50%. He did not get easy points at all. And again, we talk about the fact that he's trying to develop that outside game. He's trying to become more than a one-trick pony. A lot of times it was, okay, Giannis, you get the ball at the top of the key or you get it on the wing, and we need you to just make something happen. Toronto played very similar to what we saw teams play Ben Simmons. Not quite to that degree, but like, you're not going to just come into the paint and beat us. We're going to make life as hard as we can on you. We're going to make you earn every point. And again, his minutes, you made a great point there, and that's something that's been brought up. His minutes were all over the place. You had him at 35, 45, 34, 39, 41. Some of these games, Eric, when it's do or die, Giannis should be playing 44, 46 minutes. With all the TV timeouts and the way that you can sort of manipulate getting these guys rest, giving them some quick breathers, there's no reason he should be off the floor for 10-plus minutes in these playoff games, especially when they have to win in order to stay alive. So I didn't understand what they were doing there. I didn't understand Milwaukee's rotations at all, what they were trying to do. George Hill was very up and down. We talked about Bledsoe. They're big guys. They didn't seem to know how to use them. I mean, if Toronto's going to go Van Fleet, you have to do the same thing that every team does to Golden State, which is try to get Steph in a pick and roll and go to town on it. And because it's always going to be a mismatch. And when you have someone that's undersized like Van Fleet and you have all that size with Milwaukee, if they're going to be willing to throw him out there and you're going to have to live with him shooting those threes, then you need to pound him on the other side. And in Milwaukee just didn't do that, Eric. And in fairness to Giannis, in that press conference, him walking out, the reporter that asked him that question, the question wasn't bad, but that reporter had just came out with a story talking about how Giannis may walk from the Bucks after next year if they didn't make the finals. And there's speculation that maybe Giannis was told that story. And once that reporter asked him the question, he just got up and walked away. He certainly surprised Chris Middleton. He had no idea what Giannis was doing at that moment. But in fairness to him, I don't think it was as much frustration. I think it was he didn't want to talk about or have the next question lead to something about what his plans were longer term after they had just lost.
Well, then I can totally understand that. I didn't realize that part of it. And we'll talk in segment 2 a little bit more about reporters creating their own storylines, right?
Hey, she was an ESPN reporter, by the way.
It never.
Maybe they'll have Giannis on to talk about his free agency.
It never fails. It never fails. So I just felt like, to me, I mean, Giannis was wearing those highlighter shoes, whether they were the yellow or the orange ones, so you could easily spot him on the court. And it just seemed like he was always a little bit off of where the action really was. Now, I think in the long term, this loss is going to really help him. I mean, there's just no doubt. He's one of the most athletic presences in the league, hands down, bar none. The fact that he could be a dominant player like a Kevin Durant or a LeBron James or whoever he wanted to be, he's got all the tools. I think this loss ultimately helps him because he's so young get to that point. Yeah. You know, KD took some tough losses, right? But then he went out and played amazing in those last 2 finals for the Warriors. So I think Giannis could do that same thing. But boy, for me, Justin, Kawhi Leonard, that Toronto team, so when they lost by 22 points in game 2, they went on to win 4 in a row, and 3 of them were only by 6 points. And what that says to me is that they just wanted it more. They got every loose ball. They got every contested opportunity that they had go in their favor because they seemed to be just scrappy and be everywhere, and they wanted it more. And one of the guys I saw that from was Kawhi Leonard. I mean, the guy, sometimes it was like I thought he was teleporting because he would shoot a 3 and then the ball would be bouncing up on the rim and he would get the rebound. The rebound wasn't a long rebound. It was like under the rim in the paint. And I'm like, oh, wait, Kawhi Leonard just got the rebound from Kawhi Leonard's 3-point shot? Like, it's crazy. And so Milwaukee was getting beat all over the floor by Siakam and Gasol and Leonard and Lowry and Van Fleet, guys that just wanted it more, Justin, in my opinion.
To me, Eric, I asked you the question a couple weeks ago, and I said, is Kawhi the best player in the playoffs? Because we saw what happened with Harden. Now we've seen Giannis fall. KD went down hurt. I just feel like from both sides of the basketball, Kawhi's been the best player in these playoffs.
Yep.
It's starting now to gap where it's not really that close. It's extremely hard, I think, for anybody to make an argument against him